One of Helena's beloved organizations, the Myrna Loy Center, has been housed in the Old County Jail since 1991. It's a handsome stone building with bars on the windows to remind the passerby of its original intention. A place that was once filled with sullen humans in a dark time, now is a place of conversation, music, movies, entertainers, and art that fill the room with laughter and thought.
I am Chris Holmes, and we are here at the Myrna Loy Center, which is housed in the old Lewis and Clark County Jail. The Myrna Loy Center is one of the nation's premier rural arts organizations. So we show 2 independent films every night, and we present a whole year's worth of multidisciplinary performances, dance and music and spoken word and performances of all kinds, bringing in national level arts performances to rural Montana. The purpose of the Myrna is to support the kind of work that really makes a resilient community and that engages the creative spirit of the community, and also to bring in national artists to engage and inspire people in Helena in ways that we otherwise wouldn't get to be exposed to if we didn't bring those arts events here.
The Myrna Loy Center was originally birthed by Arne and Helena and a few fellow Helenans who grouped up to form a film society which became known as Second Story Cinema back in May of 1976.
I grew up in New York City, so I always had a great love of film in my own development when I was, 17, 18, 19, all the great directors from abroad, like Ingmar Bergman and Francois Truffaut and people like that were taking America by storm. And it was a great thrilling experience to watch these films, especially as a young man. So I had a great appetite for watching all kinds of films, American classics, independent films. And when I first moved to Helena in 1973, I came to marry my woman named Alexandra Swaney, who was a longtime Montanan. We met in graduate school in Boulder, Colorado. And we were both finishing our doctoral dissertation. And we lived in a primitive cabin on Prickly Pear Gulch near Jefferson City. But one of the things, after we got our PhDs, one of the things I missed the most was being able to see good films in Helena, because basically the other theaters, like the Gaslight at the time, or I think it was called the Circus, basically they were showing, Hollywood films and teenage exploitation films, Walt Disney and teenage exploitation films. And they would stick around for the whole summer. And for someone who loved to watch different films in the 70s, it was scarce. And so we got the idea, well, why don't we open up a theater? And along with Alexandra, a friend of ours was also excited. His name was Jay Teeger. And the 3 of us, I remember on a trip to Missoula to see the great pianist Keith Jarrett, started fantasizing about what we could show in the movie theater. So we started thinking about double bills and foreign films and independent films, and having a little book where people could say what film they wanted to see, et cetera, et cetera. And so we looked for theater seats. We found them in Fort Benton. We purchased 2 16mm projectors. So this was pretty basic, And we wound up being able to rent on the 2nd floor of 9 Placer Street. So it was a kind of an interesting space with tulip lights in the ceiling, which gave it a little bit of class. But we put tiered seating in there. And so we wound up constructing an 88-seat movie theater. And the 16mm projectors were in the cloakroom where we set them up. And that's where we spliced the film together. And then in the lobby, We had a funky popcorn machine, and we had, what do you call those, electric stools, those wooden round stools as tables, you know. And we had candy, and it was a lobby where people could, before the film, talk and stuff like that. And when we showed the films, right from the beginning, we had an introduction to each film. So one of us talked about the film a little bit, and we were responsible for selling the candy, giving someone the ticket, cleaning up, running the film, etc., etc. So it was a really mom and pop kind of outfit, and it became a labor of love.
Second Story Cinema started doing much more than just showing films. They offered their space to local talents and to touring shows.
The other elements of Second Story that started to occur as we had opportunities to present touring performances. So we started renting like the junior high school and even the Civic Center. And the first one we ever did was from Minneapolis. And they got in touch with us. They were traveling through and were looking for places to perform. And it was called the Illusion Theater. And they did a performance of Orlando, which was based on Virginia Woolf's romance novel about a person being male who transforms into female. So it was getting to know them and getting an audience for them. And they were so appreciative of the audience we got at the junior high school, about 250 people. I thought that was pretty meager, and they thought it was great. So I started learning about developing audiences, about how hard it was to get an audience and stuff like that. And eventually, the Montana Arts Council took notice of us and started getting us or inviting us to present other touring shows. And the first one was the Portland Dance Theater out of Portland, Oregon. And what was interesting was that was the first modern dance company to ever perform in Helena. And we wound up getting like 800 people in the junior high school auditorium. And that was another great thrill. What happened after that was that we were invited to participate in a regional performing arts series experiment, that they would give us some starting money and consultants, and we would take a sort of a course in learning how to put together a series of performances that would come to town. And so all this time, we're still showing the films every night. We're having special events with local artists, which just continued. And now we're starting what we call the Helena series for the performing arts. And it was a great, great thrill. And we were becoming very successful. We were expanding our board of directors. We were learning what it meant to be a nonprofit organization. We were raising money, and we were providing really many different kinds of events for many different kinds of people. And for me personally, it was just a joy.
In 1985, the old county jail was abandoned because a new jail had been built. Second Story Cinema figured they could do something with this very interesting, intriguing building for their purposes.
From 1891 until the middle of the 1980s, this was the jailhouse, and in the basement is solitary confinement. Next to that is a shooting range where the guards would practice target practice. There's a big oven where they would bake bread for the prisoners every day. The south side of the building was an apartment where the sheriff and his wife lived, or sometimes his whole family, and the sheriff's wife would cook meals for the prisoners. And where the auditorium is now, there was a double-decker, there were 2 floors of jail cells, and they had iron bars, and they had one sort of bathroom jail cell that you could look right into, and a picnic table in between the cells where the prisoners would sit down and eat, all under the scrutiny of the guards. Inside these big prison doors was the office, the sheriff's office, where you would get inducted through these doors if you were going to go into jail and be imprisoned here. So after the jail was abandoned and the Second Story Cinema and Helena Presents came in to transform it into an art center, they had to tear out all those jail cells. They had to completely reconstruct a slanted auditorium floor, put in ADA compliant restrooms, and build a concession stand. And we put offices in the part where the apartment used to be. And it was quite a transformation, but we wanted to leave the history of the building intact on the exterior. So there are still bars on the windows on the outside, and there are still some vestiges of the county jail. The building used to have these battlements on the top that kind of looked like a castle on the roof of the building, but those were damaged, really severely damaged in the 1935 earthquake, so those got taken off, and now it's just a flat roof line that you can see. This was the original jail door, and there is a story of one time in the early 20th century when they had arrested a guy for a crime to a child, and the community was really outraged by that. And you can see damage at the bottom of the door where a whole slew of men from the community got a pole and tried to ram the doors open because they wanted to get this prisoner out and hang him. But they were not successful. These are pretty sturdy doors, and it remains sturdy to this day. And we still carry the marks of that event.
We were always looking for a larger space. One of our board members, Al Lundborg, who was the founder, the owner of the Lundy Center originally, just a wonderful man, kept saying to us, you know, we really need to get a larger theater because the movies can really sustain the many of your activities, you know, they would be helpful. And one day we heard about the Lewis and Clark County Jail was going to be closing down, and they were going to be opening up a new jail, building a new jail, and that they were offering to the public, anyone who wanted to apply to take over the old jail and use it for a worthwhile purpose, they would give it to the organization or whoever. They would give the jail in for an extended period of time for $1 a year. So we went and looked at the jail, and we looked at the jail with Martin Holt, who was on our board for many years, and a great videographer, and he also loved the performances, and for him the organization was very important. And Al Lundborg also. And we went to the Lewis and Clark County Jail. First time I'd ever been in that jail, and I think the same for my two board members. And it was quite exciting because the Lewis and Clark County Jail was one of these territorial jails where the I don't know, the jail warden, whatever, was a husband and wife team who actually lived in the jail and cooked for the prisoners there. And you could see the oven where they cooked. But the real thing is when you walked in there, you saw double-decker jail cells, like really high ceiling. And it was 2 stories. So they were actually prisoners when we first went there. Prisoners on the first floor and prisoners on the second floor. And it was a pretty difficult place, you know. It smelled to high heaven. Urinals were exposed, you know, graffiti everywhere. But we decided that we could, in fact, turn this into a theater. That became our dream. We started raising money. We needed to raise ultimately $1.6 million to renovate this historic building. I thought it would be doable because A, it would be a great space, and we got an architect to scope it out and try to figure out how much, how many seats we could have in there and this kind of stuff, and where the stage might be. And we also thought that we would be preserving a Helena historic treasure, because it's the jail is Richardsonian Romanesque architecture. It, had turrets before the great earthquake in Helena, but it still was a very handsome building made of stone. It had these beautiful arches, huge arches all over the place. Even the jail bars were exciting to look at, and we kept the outside bars in the jail. There were, solitary confinement places down in the basement, which we turned into, pipes for the various systems in the whole building. And we ultimately decided to build on to the back of the building so that we created a theater space beyond the jail. So we actually expanded the amount of space that we had, and we wound up creating a 250-seat theater that had a very large stage. So it was very suitable for performances of all kinds. And it had a dance floor, so it was suitable for dance, for music, for theater. And it has been used for all those disciplines. The process of renovating the jail, it was so complicated and so involved. One of the first things we did was that we had an Indian purification ceremony. And we had Eddie Barber from the, I may have misremembering his name, from the Helena Indian Alliance, who came and did a ceremonial prayer, and with, incense helped purify the jail, which was pretty raw. And then it took 3 times as long as we ever thought to hire someone to blacksmith out the jail cells, So that took way longer, and it was much more expensive than we ever imagined. We wound up raising over $118,000 from our board members. People didn't just give chunks, but they gave it over 5 years. So it was a real basic vote of confidence in the project. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy to get everyone on board, because a project that big, raising $1.6 million, it wasn't a prosperous time in the Helena area or in the nation then, in the 80s, mid-80s. Times were hard. But we all ultimately, after thinking it through and getting everyone's input and working together, thought it was worthwhile to go for it, that it would really make a contribution to the community, that it would really change our organization and to the better, and enable us to do and to fulfill many dreams. We wound up naming the theater the Myrna Loy Center. And let me give you some background about that. I think this was Steve's idea. And Myrna Loy grew up in Helena, Montana, and she was a great motion picture actress. She started in silent film, but she had a great voice. And so when the sound pictures came, she did very well. And she ultimately was quite a star. She was voted the queen of the movies to Clark Gable's King in the 1930s. So she performed in starred in quite a few prestigious films that are still remembered today. So we were proud to name the Myrna Loy Center after her. And Steve and Max Baucus went to New York City to call upon Myrna Loy. And she was in her last years, and she agreed that she really couldn't help financially, but that she could happily lend her name to the building. So the building, when it opened in 1991, I think we opened in January, and the first performance that we had there, now we were always showing films, so we wound up having two places to show films, a small theater that ultimately just seated 50 people, and the larger 250-seat theater. And so we learned to move back and forth between performances and films, and we could hold over a film if it was successful and move it from the big theater to the small theater, or even vice versa. And we have offices there, and one of the biggest deals when we opened the Myrna Loy was we had the great fortune of having an artist named David Culver who designed the floor of the Myrna Loy, which was a slate floor. It has all these special things in it, you know, like chamber nautilus and pennies and different coins and different kinds of amoebas or things like that, you know, stones on the floor. And kids, especially kids from school, but adult kids too, just love finding those things in the floor. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous floor, and it's still in great shape and looks so great there.
The renovation of the new Myrna Loy Center was a success that took hours of hard work and determination.
Thank you all for coming. My name is Helena. I'm director of Helena Presents at the Myrna Loy Center. Tonight is one of many nights of grand openings the last week and through the month of February, the end of January, and we thank you for coming. Tonight our theme is Our Heritage is Wide, and we have many different musics of the Americas. For those of you who don't know about this facility, about 5 years ago, this place was a Lewis and Clark County jail. And where you are seated right now, there were double-decker jail cells with hundreds of prisoners in them. Now you are seated in theater seats, waiting for some beautiful music of the Americas, of many heritages. And we're very thrilled to have you sitting in these seats tonight.
Now, years later, Helena still enjoys a renowned performing arts center that is part of the fabric of the Helena community and the arts. It is these kind of places that make a community special and diverse.
And the Myrna Loy is recognized among art centers nationwide for being this kind of creative powerhouse out here in rural Montana, but also just for the level of community support and participation that we enjoy. People tell us that in a city of any size, to have this kind of community passion circled around a performing arts center is really unique and something to be celebrated in its own. So I think that is really remarkable. It just looks like a building that was designed to be a jail. And it's so wonderful that you walk inside of it and there's, you know, people laughing and singing and dancing and enjoying the arts. It's just, to me, it's a great metaphor. Built for discomfort. Yeah. And isolation. And now it's a place where people come together and enjoy wonderful things that make them feel expanded and inspired and more of a community.